Whispering Canadian, and this is part 2 of the story, so I'll get started here. Well, now we have a little issue sorted. Now that we have that little issue sorted, grab your gear and I'll show you where you'll be sleeping. I haven't got much time because Larry will be here for his heap of junk soon, and I am not done fixing it. Logan hurried back to his truck and was soon following Stacy upstairs to the second floor of the building. I swapped the rooms around, so you have the larger bedroom nearest the stairs. I figured as you were volunteering for the fire department, you're going to be paged at some ridiculous hours of the night, and I need my sleep. I'm like a grizzly bear with a thorn in its paw if I'm woken up abruptly, so mind you. You better be tiptoeing down those stairs. Logan just smiled kindly at Stacy, and he went to the place his bags inside the room. It was quite large indeed, and as he stepped over to the window to look outside, he noticed it had a commanding view of the township. Right, well, let's get Larry's car running, and you can tell me a bit more about yourself while we're fixing it, Stacy added impatiently as she drummed her fingers on the doorframe. That afternoon, an early evening went by quickly, and Logan almost forgot he had arranged to meet with the fire chief at 8 o'clock. Instead of wasting time getting into his truck, he jogged up the street to the fire hall. It only took him all of 3 minutes to get there. The chief seemed a good sort, and he welcomed the new rookie warmly. He took no time in showing Logan around the hall, including where his locker and turnout gear were kept. He handed Logan a pager. We haven't had too many actual jobs of late, but now I've said that, I probably jinxed us, he joked candidly. Now tell me something, Logan, because I'm most curious to know. What do you think of Stacy? Well, I've only just met her, but she seems very nice, sir. She knows her way around an engine, Logan replied a little apprehensively. He wasn't quite sure why the chief was asking him that question. Are you sure we're talking about the same gal? The chief chuckled. Sure enough, she's a darn good mechanic, but as far as being nice, I'd rather work with a rattlesnake, if you get my drift. And just to warn you, don't be thinking she'd make a good girlfriend. I'll repeat that. And just to warn you, don't be thinking she'd make a good girlfriend. Our sheriff was dating her for a long time, but he cheated on her. He nearly wore a monkey wrench. If he hadn't been to blame for her outburst, he probably would have arrested her for threatening a police officer. It was the talk of the town for ages. It got so bad he took a new placement elsewhere, but you never hear any of this from me. You hear? Logan nodded at the chief with a grin, but inside the misgivings he had about his new boss increased tenfold upon hearing that gossip. The chief went on to explain a few more details about this procedure to the rookie before bidding him good night. With all this fresh information brewing away in Logan's mind, he walked back to the garage and quietly made his way up the stairs. Stacy had already told him she was retiring earlier that night, so he tiptoed not to disturb her. However, no sooner had his foot touched the landing on the second floor than his pager started to beep loudly. He turned tail and practically raced back down the stairs and outside, heading for the fire hall as fast as his legs could carry him. There was no time for introductions as the fire crew threw on their turnout gear and man the trucks. The information on the pager had informed them that they were attending a structure fire 2 kilometers out of town. It was not until they got close to their location that Logan had a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. He was almost certain this way it was the same place. He had dropped the hobo off earlier that day, and the abandoned barn, which was fully involved, was the same building the hobo had been heading towards. He quickly informed the fire chief that there may be somebody inside. The chief told him to start running out the hoses, while some of the other group put on their breathing apparatus. However, as they drew close to the burning barn, the whole structure gave way and landed with a loud crash as it hit the ground. It was then they realized the fire was starting to take hold in the adjoining wheat field and was heading straight towards an oil well. The crew all worked frantically to run out the hoses and stop the fire from reaching such a dangerous source. If the oil well went up, they would be in a whole mess of trouble. Thankfully, the seasoned firefighters soon had the fire under control. Logan was given the job of checking for flare-ups among the wheat, while the chief and senior crew members checked out what was left of the barn. It wasn't long before the chief called Logan over to talk to him and the local sheriff, who had just turned up at the scene. It looks like you were right in thinking there was someone in the barn, Logan. We found human remains, and this, with a solemn look at his face. On his face, the chief held out the carved stone bear in the palm of his hand. So I guess the next question is, how did you know about our fatality? Logan wasted no time in explaining how he had met the hobo earlier that day. He told the chief and the sheriff as much about the old guy as possible. Apart from being able to give them an actual name, that was the one thing the bear never did get around to exchanging. Logan did, however, let them know about the significant carved bear. Sorry, I have to scroll sometimes. If there is some way of posting a photo of the bear in as many newspapers as possible, we might be able to locate his daughter, Logan suggested hopefully. Well, I guess that wouldn't hurt. Of course, dental records might be easier, the sheriff stated. I don't know when he would have seen a dentist last, Logan replied. His teeth didn't seem to be in any fit state, that is, at least the ones he still had. Well, we'll follow up both avenues of inquiry and see what we can dig up. Thanks for your help, the sheriff said. He took the carved bear from the fire chief and headed back to his patrol car to call in his findings. Once all the gear was packed up, the crew made their way back to the fire hall in silence. Logan figured he'd get around to meeting the other firefighters officially at some stage, but after dealing with a fatal fire, no one much felt like sharing pleasantries on the way home. It was 1:30 in the morning when Logan finally crawled into bed, and although it was not as comfortable as his bed back home, he soon drifted off to sleep. The alarm clock on Logan's phone soon let him know it was time to start a new day. If he'd had half a chance, he would have turned it off and slept until his body told him it was time to wake up. But sadly, he knew Stacy would roast him alive if he was late for work on his very first day. She was already in the kitchen, reading the newspaper and eating a bowl of granola when he walked in. She looked up at him with a scowl on her face. I'm not sure if I made myself clear to you yesterday. You woke me up thundering down the stairs last night. This is going to be a really short working relationship if I catch you doing that again. You hear me? I'm really sorry, Stacy. The pager caught me off guard. It is the first actual job I've ever been to, and I guess my adrenaline got pumping. I didn't realize I was being so noisy. I suppose it was another of them false alarms. Seems to happen a lot around here with the fire department, she stated coldly. No, actually, it was a fatal structure fire out of town, Logan replied in a quiet voice. That's a darn shame, she said half-heartedly. Well, get yourself some fresh coffee from the pot and whatever else you want to fix for breakfast. We start work at 8 sharp. Stacy's lack of empathy towards the loss of life didn't really bother Logan. He was sure there must be something in this lady's past to make her hard as nails. Being cheated on could well have been a factor. He figured that given time, she might start to warm up to him a little, once she felt she could trust him. But he certainly wasn't going to go prying into his boss's personal affairs. The day went by quickly, with a steady stream of customers showing up with all manner of mechanical problems. It seemed Stacy was well respected by her customers. When old Mrs. Jacobs drove up with a punctured radiator hose, Stacy replaced it free of charge, much to the delight of the elderly woman. I'm going to bring you a blackberry and apple pie next time I'm in town, Stacy, she said happily before driving off. That was kind of you to do, that for Mrs. Jacobs, Logan said. Logan couldn't help but saying, well, she is always bringing me food, and it was about time I returned the favor, Stacy replied, brushing off the fact that the time spent fixing the hose would have covered a good number of pies in return. That night, the pager stayed quiet, and once again Stacy went to bed early, so Logan sat in his room flicking through Facebook and catching up on some messages from his family and friends. When his mom asked him what Mr. Stacy was like, Logan didn't want to tell her that Stacy was actually a single woman. Knowing his mom, she'd be matchmaking in no time at all, and given what the fire chief had said about Stacy, Logan wanted no part of that plan. It didn't take long for the training mechanic's eye to feel heavy, and soon he was sound asleep. Once more the alarm woke Logan, but after enjoying a decent night's sleep, he didn't mind getting out of bed this time. He hit the shower, and before heading down to the kitchen, he hit the shower before heading down to the kitchen. Stacy sat in her usual spot at the table, with a newspaper spread out in front of her. She didn't seem to notice Logan as he went over to the coffee pot to pour himself a brew. Even when he sat down at the table next to her, she remained silent. However, he couldn't help but notice she was turning something over in her fingers, as she stared intently at the front page before her. Are you okay, Stacy? He asked, as a silent tear rolled